Hi, this is your Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to another episode of TFR Let's Talk. And today we have with us Simon Bennett, founder of Zap. Simon, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
First of all, I would love to know a bit about the project itself. Talk a bit about what are the core problems that you folks are trying to solve with this project.
So Zap is a tool for finding vulnerabilities in web applications. It's completely free and open source. It's used by people who are new to security right up to experienced security pros. So it can be used as a manual pen test tool, but a lot of developers use Zap in an automated way. It's what's called a DAS tool, Dynamic Application Security Testing. So it actually attacks your application in the same way that a malicious hacker would. Sure. Well, the main thing about Zap, apart from being open source, is that it's a community-based project. So when I started Zap, that wasn't my intention. I was actually looking for an open source web security project to join. I couldn't find one, so I started Zap. So it's always been a community project. We want people to get involved. So zaproxy.org is our website. There's a community section, a contributing guide. There's loads of ways to contribute, not just coding, testing, feedback, documentation. We want people to get involved. We've had developers learn security through working on Zap. We've had security people learn how to develop software, which they found very useful as well. One of our core team is actually essentially now a Zap developer, but was a security person. And we've had loads of students work on Zap, and that's been their entry to the industry. So Zap is all about community and helping people grow. So please get involved.
The way we write, deploy, use applications has kind of changed, whether we talk about web application or it doesn't matter what. And today it's Apple event. I don't know what things they will be announcing, because they always change a lot of things. With iPhone, they just change the way we consume applications. And with these changes, we also look at the whole movement that is happening with DevOps. Things are moving, shifting left. Can you also talk about when we use the term developer, how much they should care about security? Is it someone else's problem, or once again, things are moving into their pipeline, and if they are, that's just adding another job to their already very busy pipeline. So how do you look at it?
Unfortunately, I think it is a developer problem. My background as a developer, I got into security because one of my services was subject to a penetration test and didn't do very well. And as far as I was concerned, there's a lot of there's developers, we've got so many things to care about. We've got the functionality, we've got performance, we've got supportability, we've got maintenance, all these things. But we have to be good at all of them, and we have to be good enough at all of them. And I realized I didn't know enough about security. We don't have to be security experts. We don't have to be performance experts. We need to have these experts on hand to be able to give us guidelines. But we have to care about security. If developers don't understand security, then code will be vulnerable. There's nothing we can do that can be done later on. We have to go back to the code and fix the security problems there.
Excellent. Very well said, that it's no longer an afterthought or someone else's problem. But the thing is that, I don't want to even go into the Kubernetes or cloud native world, because things get complicated very quickly. So things are already quite challenging. Day two operations versus day one versus day two operations. Once again, it's not just you wrote the code, make sure that to start it was secure. Now you have to also make sure it's secure while it's running in production, but which means that your software stack was not a product, it's a process, continuous process. So can you also talk about how do you folks, and after we'll talk about it also there, kind of make things easier for developers? So because sometimes when things get too challenging, they do tend to either go on the back burner, or they do tend to put a lot of other things on back burner, updates, upgrades, new features. So in either case, you are a loser. So talk about that.
That is a very difficult problem. And security is a very difficult area. There are so many things you've got to consider. And this is one area where Zap can't solve all your problems. It's very much a point solution. So Zap doesn't understand about your source code. It doesn't understand about your dependencies. It only understands about your running application. So we try and make Zap as easy to use, but we also know there are web applications are written in so many different ways. We have to make Zap very configurable to handle all the different options. So we try and make things as easy out of the box as possible, but in the end, at the moment, Zap needs a lot of tuning to get the most out of it. And that's challenging for developers, and we try and make it easy, but we know it's a problem. And, we're not looking at all the source code, the dependencies, the infrastructure. And so you have to use different tools for all those things as well. And that's quite overwhelming for developers.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for taking that question. Now, you have joined the team at JIT. JIT, we covered them. They came out of stealth earlier this year. Talk a bit about what attracted you towards them.
Zap is a point solution. It's looking at your running application. And I've always, when I've given talks, I've explained, Zap's not a silver bullet. You need to use a lot of other security tools. What JIT is doing, it is kind of allowing you to embed security controls across the DevOps workflow. So it's taking the best of breed open source projects like Zap, and it allows developers to test the security from the code to the infrastructure to the runtime. So being part of that, it just made sense to me. I think that's how we've got to go. It's also built by developers for developers with a focus on changes and PRs. So it's very much trying to talk to developers in their language. So JIT is a DevSecOps platform. It runs and monitors all the tools, combines the results, and helps with remediation. And I think that's what we need. That's the kind of solution that we need, and that just made sense to me.
When JIT came out of stealth, I talked to David there. But I want to hear from you that how would you define the JIT platform?
It is, it's a DevSecOps platform. So it is running a whole range of security tools. It means that the developers don't have to understand the intricacies of each one, and it will grow as your business grows. So to start with, you kind of need the minimum security you can get away with, but then as you grow, you need more, and you need to grow your security with your maturity, and that's where JIT can help. And it means you don't have to be an expert in all of these things, and I think that's really important.
Can you also talk a bit, you did touch upon that, but I also want to understand a deeper kind of, not necessarily integration, but kind of synergy that will be there between JIT and Zap.
I think that, the whole development focus is completely common to JIT and to Zap. When I started Zap, I actually called it the security tool for developers. I only changed that when all the pen testers started complaining. But I think the whole philosophy is finding security issues as early as possible. That means doing it through the development lifecycle and involving developers as early as possible, right through the process, and using the tools that they use. I think that's absolutely key, and that's, we have a very common view on that.
Since you're joining JIT, what does it mean for the Zap project itself?
Well, it's great for me. It means I can carry on focusing on Zap. There is a million things to do. We're a relatively small development team, and I want to just carry on focusing on making Zap better for everyone. But in doing that, I'll make sure it's works really well within JIT and all the other companies that carry on that build on top of Zap as well. So it really allows me to focus on Zap, and anything I do will help make JIT better, because JIT aren't competing with Zap. They're providing, it's not just a pretty front end to Zap. They're providing integration with a whole load of other tools and services, all the things you need for that total security solution, which Zap is just part of.
Can you talk about in what capacity you're joining JIT? What does it mean for Zap and JIT?
Well, I'm actually joining JIT to focus on Zap, which is really great because Zap is a complex project. There's a lot going on, and JIT are essentially sponsoring my work on Zap, so I can get to work full-time on Zap, and I can make Zap better for everyone, including JIT and all the other companies that use Zap. So that is just it's really important, and is making a huge difference.
Of course, Zap is open source project. JIT. Talk a bit about how will JIT kind of contribute? I mean, of course, you were there as well, but what will be JIT's role in further growth of ZAP, and also if you can talk about how does JIT look at open source in general?
Well, JIT is already very supportive of open source. But I mean, that's one area where I'm kind of interested to get more involved in, because I'm very keen to improve the relationship between companies that use open source and the open source projects as well. So that's something I can imagine championing myself at JIT. And I haven't been here particularly long. I've been I've been able to focus on ZAP. So that's something I'm gonna understand better as I spend more time here.
Initially, you did touch a bit upon that, for developers. I also want to understand from cultural perspective. There are, of course, you folks keep coming with solutions, but culturally, how do you see folks are looking at security? Once again, we talk about it's no more an afterthought, it's no more someone else's problem, but that's what we talk about. What do you see in reality that is happening in companies? Because as much as we say, hey, developers should be aware of security, but and also the whole DevOps movement has kind of broken the old silos, but there are still soft silos. There are still folks like you who are interested in security. There are folks who are interested in networking. There are folks who are interested. So there are still these teams, and there are some silos between these teams as well. So how do you look at it, realistically, and what advice do you have for companies so that they can have a holistic approach towards security and improve their security posture?
Security has changed a lot and has improved. I mean, when I was a developer, I'd had no security training whatsoever. And I think that is changing. There is an understanding. And one thing I want to make sure is, I think there used to be a culture of blaming developers in the security community. And I think that's reduced, which is a good thing. Developers have a huge range of problems they've got to worry about, which we've touched on already, the functionality, the performance, the supportability, maintainability, all of these other things. Security isn't actually the most important thing, not for companies. Companies need software that does, solves problems for them. They need it to be secure, but it's got to solve those problems. So I always said it was much more of a management problem. It was if the managers and the management of the company didn't give security the right priority, then developers wouldn't either. So I think that has changed. The publicity around a lot of security incidents has made it easier for security people to get their voices heard, but there will still be difficulties. I think it all depends on the size of organization. If you're a very small organization, it's very difficult to have people dedicated to security, but you can still have security champions. And I think that's an important aspect, and that is something that scales across businesses of all size. If you're a very small company, you might have one security champion, but as you grow, ideally you have one security champion per team, per development team. And then hopefully, if you get to a big enough size, then you have dedicated security people to support them. But it's challenging. It's hard. There are a lot of problems out there, and there are a lot of other things that companies need to worry about, not just security.
Right, that's true. One more thing is we are kind of, it depends on how you look at it. We talk about economic downturn. We talk about potential recessions. A lot of work is going on to kind of mitigate that, but which also means, and not just that, if companies are looking at being more cost effective, cost cutting, do you also fear that this may impact security as well? Or do you think that security is an area where companies budget, they're like, we are not going to compromise the security budget, we may cut things somewhere else?
Well, I think it's definitely going to impact the security companies who charge a lot of money. There are a lot of commercial tools out there that are very expensive. And I think a lot of people are finding that open source projects like ZAP are actually very competitive with them. And companies that combine open source tools can be significantly, like JIT, can be significantly cheaper than some of the traditional security companies. So I think it's going to be an area where companies will focus and try and get the most value as possible. Some will unfortunately avoid security altogether, but I think most of them understand that they will have to invest some time and money. but it will be the solutions which are most cost effective that will be most effective, which will do best, I think.
Simon, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about Zap and JIT. Actually, there's it's nice kind of ring to it, Zap or whatever you call it. And it's also a very good story of companies sponsoring the very project that they rely on, but in sponsoring not in a way of kind of charity, but in a self-serving manner. And that's how open source works. Like, rising tide lifts all boats. The community helps each other. So, I mean, JIT is kind of part of Zap community, and Zap is part of JIT community. So they help each other. So thanks for sharing all those insights, and also thanks for sharing insights about the security landscape that is changing and how companies can improve their posture. And this is a topic which is like ongoing. So I would love to have you back on the show. But I really appreciate it. I really thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd love to come back.